Lisa Phillips is a former model who met Jeffrey Epstein when she was just 21 years old and now hosts the podcast from now on. Lisa, thank you for coming on the programme and talking to me about your experiences in this. It's great to have you with us. I'll start, if I could, by asking you about your interactions with Jeffrey Epstein, including the one that you claim involved Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Good evening to you, Lisa.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. My story started off in the British Virgin Islands. I ended up on Jeffrey Epstein's island when I was in my early 20s. I was just on a photo shoot, and one of the other young models, she was Polish, beautiful, said, I have this really amazing friend. He helped me to work in the United States by getting me a visa. And she spoke really highly of him. And so we had the day off on the photo shoot. And so Epstein sent a boat for us young girls, and we went over to this island just expecting to have, just a normal day of just, I guess hanging out on the island.
And what happened when you got there?
So when we got there, it was a normal day. We just hung out there, and I started noticing some peculiar things like older men and younger girls. And coming from the modeling industry, you see that quite a bit. So I didn't really think too much of it. Just spent the day like hanging out in the pool, met some of the other younger girls. They were younger than me. And noticed that there was this older gentleman in the pool with a blonde, sweet girl. And then we got washed up, went to dinner. And during that dinner, that's when I met Jeffrey Epstein. And he asked me a lot about myself and, where I grew up. I told him, I'd left recently from Belgium, graduated high school, and was working as a model. And that I spent a lot of time, my first few years of my life, in Oxford, England, because my father worked at NATO and at the Pentagon and was in the service. And, he said, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Oxford, I have a lot of ties there. Would you like to meet a prince? And at that moment, the older gentleman from the pool walked up, and I got to meet the prince, and he walked off. So that was the first encounter I had. And didn't think that much of it, of who that prince was,
but
until many...
The man who was at the time was Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Yes, well, I know that now. Didn't think much of it then.
Sure.
Being a little bit more American, I didn't really think so much of princes then. But yes, when Virginia Giuffre spoke out in 2019, I recognized the man. I recognized that she was there with him. And I just wanted to support her story. That's really naively what I was
Sorry, Lisa. So the blonde girl that you saw in the pool, was that Virginia Giuffre?
Well, from speaking to Virginia in 2019 and looking at the flight logs, and that's what we came to the conclusion with our attorneys, that that's who was in the pool with her, who was there during that time. And so I wanted to support her story.
And what point did you first start to witness and experience abuse on the part of Epstein and his associates?
So for myself, it happened several hours after being on the island, after dinner. Right. So we went back to our quarters, and that's when someone knocked on the door. One of the other young girls from the island said, Jeffrey's ready for his massage. And so I went, naively and blindly with the Polish girl to Jeffrey's bedroom, just thinking at the time, she said, oh, it's just a massage. Yep. And it was just a massage for a while. And then that massage turned into abuse by Epstein. And as we know, that's how he abused a lot of young women.
It is. And did you see Andrew Mountbatten Windsor again?
No, he wasn't there in the massage. He had left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was that the end of your interaction with Epstein, Lisa, or did you end up having to see him again?
Well, that was the end that night. Thank God. Waited till the morning until the boat came, and we, went back to the island and went back to New York. And I didn't have anything to do with Jeffrey for several months. But, as we know how he is, once you see things, he keeps you in his orbit. And he fought pretty hard to keep me, try to get me to go back and meet with him again. So, he eventually called me up and said, remember what you said on the island, you wanted to be a Ford model, and, I have some connections over there. Let me send you over there. And so I went and met with Ford Models at that time, which was the biggest agency in the world. And he made that connection for me.
Right. Understood. And I'm sorry, Lisa, that you were one of the so many of his, victims that are now, we know, coming to light. Can I ask you sort of how you feel about how he and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Peter Mandelson we're talking about this hour, who was until last year Britain's ambassador to the United States, how they've sort of been defended and rehabilitated, and people like yourself, survivors like yourself, have been, I'd put it to you, sort of overlooked and ignored time and time again?
Yeah, well, often that happens with victims, right? When you're speaking out, I mean, we know it's a small percentage that get justice.
Yep.
A small percentage speak out because of that reason. You're vilified in the media. Nobody wants to believe you. I think the times are shifting a bit as us Epstein survivors have come together and are fighting this fight along with many other people in Congress and representatives who are fighting for us.
Yes.
And as you see in the United States, there's a big shift against believing survivors and not these big, powerful men. So Mandelson and Andrew, they were in his orbit. I mean, they had the choice as someone in their position of power to say, you know what, too many young girls around, not going there. They had the right to choose that, like many men do. But they were one of the ones that said, hey, this looks like fun. Let me join in.
And even after the crimes came to light, both of them, we know, in their own various ways, stood by Jeffrey Epstein and advised him in some cases on how to, get out of prison.
Yes, and we are aware there were many men that checked out after it came to light that he was a prolific predator. There were many men that checked out, and these men, they continued to be friends with him. A lot of powerful men continued to be friends with him and support him and write little emails saying, I've got your back, I support you. This isn't fair, when there were, many young women who came forward during that time. But now we're aware there's 1,200 victims.
Wow.
So it's a little different now of knowing how grand and how many people, young women, children, teens, there were so many different, Jeffrey Epstein had his hand in many different ways. So.
Let me ask you just specifically, if I could, about those two men. We'll start with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who is still, refusing to respond to congressional requests that he come to the US, give evidence about what he knows, evidence that might help lead to further prosecutions, evidence that might give a degree of support to the victims and so on. What do you make of his refusal to his complete refusal to even respond to that request, Lisa?
Well, I would say, the cat's out of the bag now. Andrew, like, everybody knows you were involved. So that's just a given. We all know that. There have been plenty of witnesses and there's plenty of documents in the files. So just come clean. Just come forward. Come to the U.S. and do, regain some of that, I don't know what's left of the sympathy in the English world, but I'm in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure, but kind of regain a little bit of that and moral
integrity. Yeah.
To speak up and say, hey, you know what? I saw these things. I feel bad for what I did. I did some wrong here. You know what? But I'm going to help move the needle along and get some answers here and have some accountability.
He still, of course, denies any wrongdoing whatsoever. And Peter Mandelson, I mean, he was, Britain's most important ambassador. He was ambassador to the United States of America until late last year, appointed by our current Prime Minister. How does it feel, Lisa, as a survivor of Epstein's abuse, when you see those that stood by him, his close friends and associates, those that were doing business with him for years, even after his abuse, even after what he did to people like you is known, stand by, appointed to powerful, influential positions? How does that feel as a survivor when you see that and you hear that?
Oh, Jeffrey was a master manipulator. So it doesn't matter how old you are as a woman or how old you are as a man, they're all going to be manipulated by him. And for whatever reason, they're still under his control, even after he's passed along. So I don't understand why they still want to stick up for this man. I really feel like some of these men should really come to terms with where we are right now. Nobody's believing you. Start just telling the truth, because we deserve the truth. We deserve all the files to come out. And they should know right now that they need to start telling the truth, because it's going to come out. as you're finding out in this last dump, right?
Absolutely.
Things are coming out and it doesn't look good for them.
It certainly doesn't. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure it's still difficult to recount what happened to you on that island, so thank you for coming on and sharing it. It's really important, I think, that we make sure that the survivors of this are not forgotten. This doesn't just become a story of kind of politicians or financiers or powerful men. At the heart of this are people like Lisa, 1,200 of them, abused by Epstein, a man who was defended and stood with by the likes of Peter Mandelson, and we now know Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who both deny any direct wrongdoing. Lisa's a former model and a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein, also host of the podcast From Now On.